We tend to think of freedom of speech as this simple, absolute thing, especially in the West. But what if it's not so simple? Today, we're going to dive into a really provocative argument that questions that very idea and asks if there's a dangerous double standard hiding at the heart of how we apply this value we hold so dear. And really, the whole argument boils down to this one single, powerful question. We say speech is free, but is it a level playing field? Is that freedom actually applied equally to everyone and every viewpoint? This is the fundamental paradox we're going to unpack today. Okay, so first things first, let's establish some common ground. The ideal of free expression is, without a doubt, a cornerstone of Western democracy. But, and this is a really crucial point, it has never been an absolute ideal. Even in the most open societies, we all kind of accept that there are and probably should be some limits on what you can say.
I mean, just look at this example. In a lot of Western countries, the law puts explicit limits on speech. Questioning the historical reality of the Holocaust isn't just something that gets you canceled on social media. It's an actual criminal offense. You could go to jail for it. So right there, we see that the principle of legally limiting certain kinds of speech, it's already firmly in place. And this is where the author's main argument really comes into focus. They call it the selective speech paradox. The whole idea is that those legal limits we just talked about, well, they aren't applied consistently. The author argues there's a clear and troubling double standard at play. And when you lay it out like this, the contrast is pretty stark. On one side of the scale, you have speech that's criminalized, like questioning the Holocaust, or, as the author points out, what might just be legitimate criticism of foreign policy. But then, on the other side, actions that are specifically designed to mock and denigrate secret Islamic symbols often get a legal pass, protected under the banner of free expression. It's this imbalance that is the absolute heart of the paradox. So what gives? Why the inconsistency? Well, according to this argument, it's not an accident. It's not some oversight. It's a feature, not a bug, of how the legal system is being put to use. The argument here is that the rule of law itself is being used selectively, or as the author puts it, it's being weaponized. The idea is that specific legal tools are being used in a way that ultimately silences certain kinds of dissent, especially when it's coming from the Muslim community. For a key example of this, the author points to the UK's 2006 Terrorism Act. Under this law, speech that could be seen as perfectly legitimate criticism of foreign policy can be legally twisted and reframed as glorifying terrorism, a serious crime that can land you in prison. And what this does is create what's known as a chilling effect. It starts when political dissent is basically reframed as a potential crime. Then, because the law is so broad and kind of ambiguous, people start to self-censor. They just stay quiet, not because they're extremists, but because the legal risk of simply speaking their mind has become too high, too unpredictable. That fear, that's the chilling effect. This quote from the author really just says it all. The rule of law is weaponized against one community while shielding the deliberate provocation of another. It paints a picture of the law having this dual and deeply unequal function in our society. Okay, but you might be thinking, what about robust debate? Don't we need to be able to criticize religion? This is a key distinction the author makes. The point isn't to shut down all criticism, not at all. It's about drawing a line between genuine inquiry and what is just a calculated insult. So the author draws this very clear line. On one side, you have genuine intellectual inquiry. This is serious academic critique based on real knowledge. But on the other side, you have calculated provocation. They call it humiliation masquerading as free expression, where the real goal isn't debate, it's just to mock and denigrate. And to back this up, the author offers a really potent piece of evidence. They point to serious, high-profile academic critics of Islam, like Patricia Crone and Tom Holland, and they note that, no one has burned an effigy of them. The argument is that the Muslim community can and does engage with serious critique. What it rejects is pure humiliation. So, why does all of this legal stuff matter so much? Well, this is where the author issues a really stark warning, connecting this perceived legal imbalance to a very dangerous and very real historical pattern. The consequences here are incredibly high stakes. The author argues that this selective use of the law actually mirrors the first stage of a historically recognized pattern of group-targeted harm. And that first stage is classification, whereas society starts to create these sharp legal and social lines between us and them. And that is often followed by a second stage, symbolization.
This is the point where the specific symbols that define a group's identity, things that are sacred to them, are singled out and become targets for public attack and ridicule. And this can then lead to a third stage, discrimination. This is where the law itself is used to formally deny rights to that specific group, essentially writing their otherness into the legal code and creating systemic inequality.
So let's see how the author maps their argument onto this framework. They argue classification is happening when laws effectively create an us versus them by protecting one group's history but not another's. Symbolization happens when mocking one group's secret symbols is legally defended as free speech. And discrimination is seen when laws, like that Terrorism Act, are used to selectively silence one community's political voice. It's a truly sobering comparison to make.
And this all leads to the author's ultimate warning. This feeling of injustice, fueled by what they call repeated acts of provocation, it doesn't create dialogue. It does the opposite. It risks creating the very clash of civilizations that leaders on all sides are always saying they want to avoid.
So if that's the problem, what's the solution? The author doesn't just critique, they actually propose a path forward, and it's all centered on one key principle: consistency. Consistency in how we apply the law. The author basically lays out a three-step path to fairness. First, end the double standard. It's simple. Apply speech laws fairly and consistently to everybody. Second, we have to recognize the difference between genuine inquiry and deliberate humiliation. Intent matters. And finally, we have to establish actual mutual respect, not just slogans, because that's the only ground where real dialogue can ever happen.
And the author's final takeaway is this: until this selectivity in our laws is addressed, big appeals to universal values like free speech are just going to continue to ring hollow for anyone who feels like they're on the wrong side of that double standard.
And that leaves all of us with a final, powerful question that really cuts right to the core of what justice is all about. If a law isn't applied equally to everyone, is it really a just law at all?